Behind the garage doors of Fast and Loud, there was some trouble between Sue Martin and some people on the show. Now, after working on the show for many years, she has told us about the 5 people she had the most problems with. Let's find out who they are. A different path, from farm to garage. In Dallas, Texas, Richard Rawlings had a shop called Gas Monkey Garage. He and his team looked for old, broken classic cars. They traveled all over the country, going from one state to another, finding cars that looked like junk. Some were rusty, broken, or almost completely destroyed. But Richard saw something special in every single one. When they brought the cars back to the garage, the team would take them apart, fix every single piece, and make them work again. By the end, the cars would slowly become beautiful custom builds. People watching got to see everything from the dirty start to the pretty finish. The cars often got sold for lots of money. But what made Gas Monkey Garage special wasn't just the cars. It was the team working there. These weren't just people who fixed cars, they were like artists in their own way. Every person had a special skill that helped make the cars better. Sometimes Richard brought in people from outside to help, someone who had a special talent that could make the project even better. That's when a woman named Sue Martin, who everyone just called Sue, became part of the show. She was different from everyone else on the team. Her shop worked on upholstery, and she was one of the best at it. She didn't just fix seats or redo the inside of cars. She changed them completely. It didn't matter if it was a rare old car or a newer hot rod. Once Sue worked on the inside, the car became something way more fancy and professional. Sue came from Taiwan originally. She family that worked on a farm. Those early years were really hard, and life taught her that she needed to work hard every single day. While growing up, she learned a useful skill called upholstery. That skill stayed with her even after she got married and had kids. In 1984, she moved to the United States with her family and tried to start a new life there. Things changed for her in 1990 when she decided to take on a small project. She wanted to fix up the inside of her husband's 1968 Gran Torino. She worked on it with a friend, and they used her garage as their workspace. When they finished the project, it looked so amazing that it opened her eyes to what she was capable of doing. From that moment on, she started looking for chances to work in the upholstery business. After doing small jobs and learning more about how it all worked, she found a company that was closing down. It was an upholstery shop in Dallas, and Sue saw an opportunity there. She bought the shop for $4,500 and moved into a tiny 1,000-square-foot garage. That's how her own business, ASM Auto Upholstery, got started. Sue worked like crazy. There were times when she stayed in the shop for days, barely getting any sleep, just so she could finish jobs on time. She put everything she had into her work and made sure every single project came out perfect. She kept working on her art for years, and slowly her name started to mean something in the world of custom cars. After a while, she moved her business across the street into a building that was twice as big as her old shop. This gave her way more room to grow her business, and that's when things really started to get better for her. Richard Rawlings had his shop just down the street. He heard about Sue, not just because her work was so good, but also because she had a strong and bold personality. She didn't try to fit in with everyone else. She stood out and was different. Richard decided to give her a chance by sending over one of his cars to see what she could do with it. That was the start of something new for both of them. Their working relationship was really strong, and when Fast and Loud started filming episodes, it didn't take very long for Sue to show up on camera. People watching loved her right away. Her skill was obvious, and her personality made every episode more interesting. She didn't hold back her feelings and didn't try to act nice just because cameras were around. She acted the same way she always had, which brought more energy to the show. If Gas Monkey Garage had been in a different place, she might never have been part of the show at all. But it seemed like fate brought them together, and her appearances on the show started to grow. After some time, the crew didn't just film inside Richard's garage anymore. They started going to Sue's shop to record her part of the car building process. And just like that, being on the show helped Sue's business. It grew even more than before. People watching at home could finally see the kind of amazing work she did. Her upholstery work really stood out, and customers started coming in from everywhere. Every stitch and every fabric choice showed how much attention she paid to details and how proud she was of her work. Her interactions with Richard and his crew often became funny moments on the show. There was always some kind of argument or when Sue would push back against them. People watching couldn't always figure out if she was just joking around or if she was really annoyed. Either way, it made her parts of the show really unforgettable for everyone. She didn't even like the name Gas Monkey. Instead, she came up with her own name for it and used that name every time she talked about the crew. But her relationship with some people on the cast wasn't always what it looked like on camera. Here are some of those people. Number 1 is Richard Rawlings. From the very first time Richard Rawlings, immigration subjected Sue Martin into Gas Monkey Garage, there was an interesting feeling in the air. Sue didn't try to impress anyone at all. She just got busy with her work. But that didn't mean people didn't notice her. Richard had built his business on doing things fast, making big moves, and having loud voices around. And Sue didn't fall behind at all. She brought in her own energy, her sharp eyes, and her own set of rules for how she worked. At first, Richard saw Sue as just another person working on the team. He needed someone who could handle the insides and finishes of cars, and Sue had already made a big name for herself doing that kind of work. He thought she would fit right in and just follow his orders. But Sue didn't work like that at all. She spoke up for herself, took charge of her part of building the car, and pushed back when something didn't feel right to her. Richard was used to being the one who made all the decisions, and he didn't like that easily. They didn't get into big shouting matches, but the theorists between them got really heavy more than once. Richard had a way of brushing people off when things got tense between them. He would crack a joke or wave someone away, but Sue didn't let that happen. She didn't play around when it came to her work, and she wasn't afraid to stand her ground. Richard noticed that about her, and even though he didn't say it out loud, it made him think twice before trying to boss her around. The way they worked was very different. Richard moved really fast, sometimes way too fast. He would give the team a short amount of time to finish and expect perfect work. Sue needed more room and more time to do things the right way. She wasn't going to rush through a job just to meet some flashy deadline for TV. That caused problems more than once. Richard would come around asking if the seats or panels were finished, and Sue would still be stitching them together. He would pace around feeling frustrated, but she would keep her head down and finish the work on her own terms. But underneath all those tough moments, they did learn how to work around each other over time. Richard figured out that Sue wouldn't let anything leave her shop unless it was done the right way, and Sue, after working on a few tough car builds, started to understand Richard's pressure points better. She didn't make her tone any softer, but she learned how to handle him better. They didn't build a warm friendship together, but they built something that actually worked for getting jobs done. And because of that, they were able to get the work finished. Sue didn't hang around the garage very much. She had her own place to work and her own team of people. But whenever she did come by the garage, everyone paid attention to her. Richard, even if he didn't say very much about it, made sure she had everything she needed to do her job. In the end, their connection wasn't friendly or fun, but it was really strong. They pushed each other, argued sometimes, and both stood their ground. But when a car came out finished with Sue's special touch inside it, Richard always made sure the world got to see it. That said, enough about their relationship. Number 2 is Aaron Kaufman. Aaron Kaufman and Sue Martin worked in two totally different worlds, but under the same roof. Aaron stayed under the hood of cars, working on engine builds, suspensions, and frame problems. Sue stayed with fabrics, stitching seats together, matching trims, and finishing the look of the inside. They didn't work right next to each other, but their work always crossed paths at some point. Every time Aaron brought a car build to life, Sue had to bring out the character and beauty inside it. That overlap sometimes caused friction between them. Aaron had a habit of thinking really deeply about things. He would spend hours fixing small problems that most people wouldn't even notice or see. Sue worked the same way, staying focused and determined, but she moved according to her own schedule. When they worked on the same project together, that gap in their timing started to become obvious. Aaron would try to wrap things up and move forward to the next step, but Sue wouldn't release anything that didn't feel IMF to her yet. That tension hung in the air during tight deadline times, especially on episodes where every single second really mattered a lot. They didn't talk to each other very much. Aaron wasn't the type of person to start conversations with people, and Sue didn't waste her time on small talk either. But whenever they did actually speak to each other, it felt loaded with tension. Both of them took a lot of pride in their work, and neither one liked being told what they should do. That set things up for some rough moments between them. Aaron, when he got stressed out, would get short and direct with his words. Sue didn't hold back her feelings either. Once or twice, Aaron stormed off and left when Sue pushed back really hard. But he never crossed the line with her. He could see how serious she was about everything. In the middle of building a car, when everyone's nerves were stretched really thin and the crew was moving in different directions, Aaron would check in on how Sue's progress was going. He didn't hover over her or watch her constantly. He didn't try to control, throne what she was doing. He just needed to know if they would be able to meet the deadline they had. There were times when Sue would give him a simple nod and then go back to her needlework without saying anything. Other times, she would tell him straight up that they weren't ready yet, and that was that. No more discussion needed. Despite all the friction between them, Aaron respected Sue's skills a lot. He saw how she handled the materials, how she brought an old, torn interior back to life and made it beautiful again. He knew how much care she put into choosing the right colors and patterns. Even when their timing didn't match up perfectly, her work always matched the vision they had. Over time, he started to trust her way more than before. He backed off and gave her space when she needed it, and she worked faster when he showed that there was real pressure on them. They never became friends with each other, but they did manage to meet somewhere in the middle. Whenever Sue sent something back to the garage, Aaron took the time to check it over carefully. He didn't do it to criticize her work, but to admire what she had created. The two of them had very different ways of working on things, but both of them cared way more than they showed. In a shop that was full of noise and people moving fast, they both held on to their focus on quality. It was never about liking each other as people. It was about delivering something clean and well done. And even if they didn't say it out loud, both of them knew they couldn't finish the job without the other person's help. Number 3 is Casey Martu. Casey Martu and Sue Martin worked in different corners of the car-building process, but both of them brought something rare and special into Gas Monkey Garage. Casey painted cars with precision and had a really strong sense of color. Sue used matching fabric, thread, and texture to make things look great together. Neither one of them tried to intimidate the other person. They just let their work do the speaking for them. That attitude built a quiet bridge between them, even though their paths didn't always run smoothly together. Casey liked to keep things really clean and structured in his work area. He ran his paint booth like a well-oiled machine. Timelines, preparation, and finish. Everything mattered a lot to him. Sue, on the other hand, worked more with instinct and feeling. She didn't rush through anything. She let her hands move with rhythm, not with pressure from others. When the team expected a car to come together really fast, Casey and Sue would both find themselves caught in the middle of the rush. Paint jobs and interior work usually came last in the process, and they both needed time that most people didn't want to give them. They shared the same frustrations without always saying very much about it to each other. Sue could see how rushed Casey felt when a deadline was getting close. He could see her frustration when someone tried to drop off seat covers without giving her any warning first. They didn't argue face-to-face very often, but when delays started stacking up on top of each other, things grew really tense between them. One time, Casey had a finished car just waiting there, but Sue's part of the works hadn't come in yet. He pulled the stitches she needed to do. Their tension filled up the whole room, even without them saying loud words to each other. But underneath all of that tension, there was a strange kind of teamwork happening. Casey understood the pressure that Sue faced every day. Upholstery was always the very last piece of the puzzle, the final touch on a car. If it looked wrong or off, the whole build felt unfinished and incomplete. Casey had his own version of that same stress with his paintwork. A tiny flaw or mistake could ruin the entire look of the car. That shared pressure pulled them together in a way they didn't need to talk about. They started to lean on each other without needing to have long talks about it. It was just a way of working together that felt sharp and honest between them. Their bond wasn't close in the usual sense that people think about. They didn't joke around with each other or hang out together after work hours were over. But when something went wrong on a car they were working on, they usually ended up solving the problem together. KC once had a paint tone that clashed really badly with a fabric that Sue was planning to use. The build stopped completely. Everyone stood around not knowing what they should do to fix it. Sue walked up to him, handed him a swatch of fabric, and just waited there. Casey stood there looking at it, thought for a moment about what to do, and then went back to repaint the car. No one else needed to step in and help them figure it out. Over time, they built a really strong working rhythm together. They didn't cheer each other on or give compliments, but they didn't cut each other down or criticize either. In a fast-moving place like Gas Monkey Garage, that kind of mutual understanding meant something really important. And even if KC and Sue never became close friends with each other, their work fit together like pieces of the same machine. They were always moving forward together, always finishing strong and doing good work. Number 4 is Christy Brimbury. Christy Brimbury and Sue Martin didn't build the actual cars, but they kept the whole machine running smoothly behind the scenes. Christy stayed in the office area, pushing papers around, handling business deals, and making sure everything ran on time like it should. Sue worked in her own space, stitching fabric, cutting materials, and rebuilding car interiors from scratch by hand. They weren't part of the same team exactly, but their paths crossed way more often than most people actually saw on TV. And when they did cross paths, sparks would fly between them. Christy was tough, loud and really sharp with her words. She ran the front of the garage with a firm grip on everything, not letting anyone slack off or miss a deadline. Sue was just as strong as Christy, but in a totally different way. She didn't chase anyone around or bark orders at people. She simply focused on her craft and didn't like being told how to do her job by anyone. That difference in how they approached things created tension early on. They didn't fight very often, but they definitely clashed with each other when they did interact. Christy had an important job to do. She needed to keep the shop moving and keep the show on track for filming. That meant checking timelines constantly, calling vendors for parts, and chasing down anything they needed. Sue didn't like to be rushed at all. She worked best when she was left alone to figure things out in her own way. When a car build started running behind schedule, Christy would get pulled into the mess, and that's usually when she would turn her attention towards Sue and her work. Christy needed to see results quickly. Sue didn't like being pushed to go faster. Whenever Sue ignored Christy and just concentrated on doing her job right, that drove Christy absolutely crazy. She liked having control over situations, and Sue didn't give control to anyone at all. But with time passing, both women started to understand each other a little bit better. Christy saw that Sue wasn't trying to slow things down on purpose. She was trying to keep the standard of work really high and good. And Sue began to see that Christy wasn't just giving out orders to be bossy. She was holding everything together behind the scenes and keeping the business running. Slowly, the tension between them softened into something more like respect for each other. Christy started calling Sue earlier in the process of building cars, making sure she got all the materials she needed up front before starting.